What's up, everybody? It's Izzy. I know I haven't made a lot of videos lately, but that is about to change in 2018. So I want to get right into the topic at hand. One of the questions that I've been getting asked a lot lately by athletes that I work with and just people on the internet on like Facebook, and I assure you it's not just you if you think this is about you, is what is the relationship, or at least my opinion, on the whole no-fat movement and self-improvement and lifting. So for those of you who don't know what no-fap is, it's basically giving up masturbation completely. I think this started on Reddit, but it might have gone from deeper places on internet forums and just made Reddit its home eventually. So I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, how could this possibly have anything to do with self-improvement and fitness? But it has a lot to do with it, so let me break down to you my take. So first of all, the only real research out there about just strictly masturbation and say improving performance in the gym comes from a study that everybody references, and it has to do with testosterone. What the study essentially showed was that after 7 days of abstinence from orgasm, your testosterone levels rise for about 7 days and then they plateau again. So a lot of people took this to mean that they should only orgasm once a week in order to maximize their testosterone levels. Now the problem with this is that testosterone is elevated inside of the physiologic range. So what I really mean by that is, let's say that the average testosterone level is something like 600 nanograms per deciliter, total testosterone. If we take that to 700 or 750, we don't really know what kind of a training effect that is going to have. We don't know what effect that's going to have on mood, on libido. We don't really know if that makes it that big of a difference. So while it's interesting, it's probably not enough of an incentive to really go down the path of planning and organizing your orgasms in that manner. Now, the bigger deal to me comes when we have to make a distinction between masturbation and internet pornography, because there are a ton of potential harmful effects of internet pornography that do not exist when we're talking strictly about masturbation. So in order to explain my point on this, I have to back up a little bit and address addiction as a whole. So whether any kind of addiction, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's gambling or behavioral addiction or a drug addiction, such as, let's say, heroin or alcohol addiction, all of these things create underlying physiologic changes to the brain. The most important for our purposes is what it does to the way that you handle dopamine. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is released when you are engaging in pleasure-seeking activities. So when you go looking for good food, or you bite into a nice juicy apple, or you have some ice cream, or you have sex, or you do really anything that is exciting and rewarding on a biological level, your brain will release a hit of dopamine to encourage you to engage in that activity again. Over time, with repeated exposure to these dopamine-releasing stimuli, pathways in the brain become strengthened and more easily accessed so that you can engage in this behavior again and again and again. It's an evolutionary way of ensuring our success in replicating our genes and in surviving by giving us rewards for doing things that are good. Now, the problem, of course, with this whole scenario, or this whole picture, is that in the modern world, we have these stimuli that didn't exist in nature, and although they give us rewards as if they were beneficial, they are not beneficial. So, for example, you might get an enormous, overwhelming dump of dopamine when you do cocaine, but cocaine is not benefiting your life. Maybe some would argue that, but I would say that's pretty clear that cocaine is not going to benefit your life. However, your brain will respond as if it does. And not only does it respond that way, it responds that way in a way that doesn't compare to a natural stimuli. So when you're eating an apple, yes, you're going to get a hit of dopamine, but it's not going to be anywhere near the magnitude of the dopamine hit that you get when you take cocaine. That should be fairly obvious to anybody. Now, where this becomes interesting is that when you have repeated exposure to a stimuli that releases high amounts of dopamine, you become desensitized. Not only does the body potentially produce less dopamine in response to other more normal stimuli, but you actually have a downregulation of receptors, and they've even done brain scans that show a reduced amount of gray matter in people with addictions. So all this is to say simply that your brain protects itself from these overwhelming, supernatural flooding of dopamine release from things like cocaine and internet pornography, gambling, or whatever the addiction may be, in order to make you less sensitive to dopamine as a whole. it makes it harder for you to release dopamine and to feel the effects. And that is why when people quit a drug, they'll report symptoms of something called anhedonia. Now, I don't know if I said that right, but essentially it's a condition where you feel a lot less pleasure. Like music doesn't sound as good, colors aren't as bright, you don't have motivation to do anything. Things that would make you sad or happy in the past, you just feel nothing. And this is where this can really tie into self-improvement and fitness when we're talking about internet porn. So as I was mentioning earlier about dopamine, there are certain activities that release more dopamine than any other. And you might have guessed that sex is the biggest one. Everything in your gene's primary objective is to replicate. So all activities that relate to sex, orgasm, reproduction, give you the biggest hits of dopamine relative to anything else. And porn is an addiction that falls under the sex category. So the amount of dopamine that you get from internet porn is just as off the charts as it would be for, in some cases, some of these harder drugs that we've discussed. Now, the reason why this is the case is because of high-speed internet porn and the novelty factor. So your ancestors probably wouldn't have seen, 20, or let's say 100. Your ancestors probably wouldn't have seen 100 potential sexual partners in their entire lifetime. But with high-speed internet porn and these internet porn tube sites, you can have 10 tabs open and click through them all, one at a time, and have 100 visual partners in one porn session. And what this just absolutely makes huge underlying physiologic changes to the brain when the stimuli is repeated enough times, as it would be in any addiction. And because of that, you get some of the exact same symptoms and problems that you see in hardcore drug users and alcoholics, and that is that motivation for anything else is decreased. All the things I said about feeling less pleasure, colors, sounds, and these are symptoms that tens of thousands of people have reported improving when they go on the no fap, when they do no fap. And generally, of course, it's going to take time for any of these symptoms to dissipate and reverse, because obviously you didn't build these habits. If you have an addiction, or even if it's just lighter use, it didn't happen overnight, so the symptoms are not going to dissipate overnight either. But the important thing here is that by abstaining, and I'm not talking about masturbation, this is not an evangelical thing here, it's strictly talking about internet porn and the underlying physiologic changes that it can make because of how powerful of a stimuli that it is. If you quit engaging in this activity, your dopamine response to normal things like reading a book or going to the gym or say, eating a healthy food, all of these things are going to be more easily produce a pleasurable feeling for you, and it's going to make it more easy to establish these things as habits. It's extremely difficult to be self-motivated and try to start a business or get that promotion at your job or get straight A's in school or whatever your goal may be as far as self-improvement goes if you have no motivation. And one of the things that can sap you of motivation are these types of addictions. Now, most people look at porn as completely harmless, but there is just a massive emerging amount of evidence to suggest that that is absolutely false. And that's really the only thing that I wanted to raise awareness to in this video, is I wanted you guys to look, and girls for that matter as well, to look at this in a completely different light as far as internet pornography goes. Now, if you want more of the hardcore scientific research behind this topic, if you want to see, the studies that have some of these brain scans that look at internet addiction, video game addiction, internet porn addiction in more depth, I would highly recommend that you check out the website yourbrainonporn.com. I will put a link in the description box. It's written or made by a physiology teacher named Gary Wilson. He's done a tremendous amount of research on this subject. It's all available on the website. And if you do have a problem with internet porn, or you just think that, or even if you're just somebody that is a casual user, you may want to consider this as something that you can try to improve your motivation and to improve your life. So that's all I have to say about it. Again, if you want more information, check out yourbrainonporn.com. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. There will be a lot more coming out very soon. Have a nice day. Peace.